Hello again, and a huge welcome to GNDR's celebrationary webinar to mark International Day of Disaster Risk Reduction. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Becky Murphy. I'm Head of Policy and Research for GNDR, and I'll be moderating the session today. I'm sure you're aware that the theme of this year's International Day of DRR is Finance for Resilience. UNDRR have just launched their global assessment report, which has found that disasters are becoming more frequent, more costly, and more devastating, with direct costs at approximately, I think it was 202 billion, but the true cost being estimated to be 11 times higher than that at nearly 2.3 trillion, making this topic to finance to prevent disasters and build resilience essential. We've got a really exciting agenda for you today to recognise and celebrate the incredible work that our 2,000 plus civil society member organisations do across the globe with those communities living on the front line of disaster risk. We'll kick off shortly with some opening remarks from our Executive Director. We're then going to hear directly from the head of UNDRR, SRSG Kamal Kishore, who's recorded a special video message for us. We're then going to hand to three of our brilliant members to spotlight and showcase the work that they are doing. And after that, we'll shift over to a bit of a donor member state UN perspective, where our allies from Sida and UNDRR will share their reflections. I'm going to hand straight over to Marcus, our Executive Director, for some opening remarks. Over to you, Marcus.
Thank you so much, Becky. Briefly, I just wanted to welcome everyone for joining us today in celebrating this International Day for Disaster Reduction. Because yes, today it is also a day dedicated to us, the civil society organizations that work tirelessly with and for communities on the front line. We, civil society organizations who are part of these communities and share the enormous resilience and capacities of their members, we also deserve to have space, a bit of a space to recognize the incredibly effective work we all do. And that is why we are here today. To celebrate these capacities and to make sure that this effectiveness come to say that this effectiveness come from our very nature and DNA. We come from and we are part of these communities. That basically means that we are localization. And that makes us not only special, but also indispensable in any disaster reduction strategy at any level, whether community, national, or global. We better than anyone know that disasters happen when not enough is invested in preventing them. This is the theme of this year's International Day for Disaster Reduction: fund resilience, not disasters. And we know better than anyone that the necessary investments are effective and sustainable when they meaningfully involve communities and civil society. That is what we want to celebrate today. More investments are definitely needed, but they must be localized. We want to highlight this by celebrating the great work of our GNDR member organizations, using practical examples to show the full capacity of civil society to build effective resilience through localized investments. At the webinar, you will hear stories from Bangladesh, Nigeria, and Bolivia, but on our website, you will find many other stories compiled for this celebration from Nepal, Lebanon, Yemen, DRC, Fiji, Pakistan, Madagascar, I don't know, many other countries and communities. You will see how the Lake Bogoria landscape in Kenya is being transformed by young people focused on restoring the local ecosystem, for example, or how community members in Beteki settlement in Fiji living along the riverbank where their houses are frequently destroyed during cyclones, after the views from the frontline local assessment work in constructing safe and durable houses together to reduce risk. Those examples, as said, need to be celebrated. I just wanted to thank you again very much for joining us. And of course, a special thanks to our donors, to Sida, who is with us today over here. Also, special thanks to UNDRR for all its support and again for being here with us. But a special thanks for all of you, our members, sharing your great know-how, sharing with us your great work. Yeah, just wanted to invite you all to celebrate with us this special day and the great work that GNDR members do every day at the community level. Thank you very much. Back to you, Becky.
Brilliant. Thank you, Marcus. And yeah, really important messages there of celebrating the work that's being done across our network, specifically at that community level. So without taking any more time, I'm going to ask Danny to launch our special video that's been pre-recorded by Kamal Kishore specifically for us. So over to you, Danny.
Colleagues and friends in the global network of civil society organizations for disaster risk reduction, I'm delighted to send this message to join you in commemorating the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction and in celebrating the work of your members. Let me begin by congratulating you once again on receiving the 2025 Sasakawa Award for Disaster Risk Reduction. This prestigious recognition is a testament to your tireless efforts in empowering communities, advocating for inclusive risk governance, and amplifying the voices of those most at risk. We are grateful to have GNDR as a partner, especially given the critical role civil society plays in implementing the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. This role is more important than ever as we mark this year's International Day under the theme, Fund Resilience, not Disasters. This theme calls for both an increase in DRR funding and for all investments to be risk-informed. These calls to action align closely with GNDR's priorities and the powerful call to action you issued at the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction earlier this year. That is why I invite all GNDR members to help us champion this theme. Specifically, allow me to suggest 3 ways you can contribute. First, help us build public demand for resilience funding. It is not enough for us to engage governments. We must also educate and inform the public about the benefits of investing in resilience. This is key to generating organic, sustained demand for DRR funding in budgets. Second, facilitate risk dialogues to inform decision-making. When government or business investments threaten local interests, civil society organizations often play a leading role in elevating those concerns to decision makers. We need your support in flagging local disaster risk vulnerabilities to those in charge of large investments to ensure that all development is risk-informed. Third, help us show that resilience pays. Your proximity to local communities gives you access to many untold success stories. Please capture and amplify stories that show the tangible benefits of resilience, whether it is a reduction in humanitarian needs, development gains that were protected, or a livelihood that was saved from disaster. We need these stories to complement hard data and make the case for investing in resilience. Friends, the next 5 years are crucial for accelerating the implementation of the Sendai Framework, and financing is key to that progress. Let us work together to ensure that every dollar invested is a dollar towards resilience, and that the needs of those most at risk are always prioritized. I'm grateful to GNDR for its leadership and partnership, and I commend all of you for your unwavering commitment to building resilience for all. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Danny, for sharing that. And that really brilliant message there, a message of solidarity, of course, from UNDRR with the work that we're doing, and also those 3 key asks from us. So I suppose we can try and keep them in our mind as we go through today's discussion, but also beyond in the work that we're doing. So help build that public demand, facilitate those risk dialogues with decision makers, so all development is risk informed, and help us show that resilience pays and has an impact. So hopefully we can work together to try and start documenting or continue to document the impact this is having. And I know our 3 speakers are going to speak to that third one in particular, but I'm sure to all of them, and showcase really what's happening in the civil society organisations, the brilliant work that's being done and the impact that it's having at the community level. So in my perspective, the most exciting part of the webinar is now about to begin as we hear from 3 of our brilliant members. I'm going to give a quick introduction to each of them, and then I'm going to hand straight over to hear from them. So we'll first of all kick off with Iftekhar, who is from the Centre for Services and Information on Disability in Bangladesh. He has over 20 years of professional experience in disability inclusion, research, disaster management, child protection, rights-based advocacy, and development programme implementation. He serves as director at the Centre for Services and Information on Disability, where he's been since 2005. We're then going to hand over to Monica from Bolivia. She's currently part of the practical action team there. She has experience in coordination skills in areas related to risk management, resilience at both the national and international level, as well as knowledge on the application of approaches to gender, protection, safeguarding, inclusion, and interculturality. Until last year, she served as the focal point in Bolivia for GNDR. So she's a dear GNDR friend for sure. We're then going to hand over to Edet, who is a passionate development and relief worker from Nigeria. With a background in public administration, safety and security, has built expertise in crisis anticipation and action, as well as nature-based solutions for disaster and climate resilience. He's worked with organisations tackling environmental degradation, disaster management, and contributed to projects that have made a real difference in the lives of the communities on the front line of risk. So we have 3 huge experts working in different regions across the globe to share with us the work that they're doing and their expertise and experience. So without taking up any more time, we'll kick off and hand over to Iftekhar to please kick us off with your presentation. Over to you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Becky, and thank you, GNDR. This is my first presentation in the GNDR forum. Thank you. I'm Iftekhar Ahmed, working with Center for Services and Information on Disability, Bangladesh. This is the disability-focused organizations. And I'm going to present my topic is Cyclone Sida, that response for persons with disabilities in southern part of Bangladesh. You know, Bangladesh is a disaster-prone area. That's why we always facing the DRR types of things. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. In 2007, there was a huge cyclone Sida that struck in the southern part of Bangladesh, and that is the coastal part of Bangladesh actually, where over 10,000 people died, 4 million people affected. And as we are working for the persons with disabilities, we have found that persons with disabilities faced high vulnerability, losing their shelter, assistive devices, livelihood, and basic services also. As we are working for the children and adults with disabilities, that's why we quickly responded to address their issues for their survival to ensure their accessibility and recovery. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Why they needs previous one, please. Previous slide. Actually, why they need support actually? Because we have found that so many houses, so many construction of persons with disabilities demolished and damaged. That's why they need support. And though the government at the time provided food support to the persons with disabilities, but because of lack of accessibility, inaccessible road system and transportation system, they could not go to the shelter home or service centers. That's why we need to provide them food support. We need to provide them medical support. And we have found that because of the disaster, so many assistive devices damaged. That's why we provided them new assistive devices, and we also provided support them restarting their businesses and income generating activities. And one thing we done, we organize medical camp into the community level, because it was not possible for the persons with disabilities to go to the mainstream medical camp. That's why we organized medical camp near their home actually. And after the disaster Sida, we have found that uh, many children with disabilities, they become traumatic because of sudden change. That's why we provided psychosocial support to the children with disabilities also. Next slide, please. Definitely, there were huge impact because of our activities. Uh, Continued access to schooling for 300 children with disabilities, because we have rebuilding 5 primary schools that destroyed because of the Sidor, and we provided safe drinking water, a reliable access of to safe water for over 1,300 families via 3 tube oil that we set up. And definitely we provided constructing home services to 58 persons with disabilities. And health and nutrition was immediately needed at that time. And that's why we enhanced well-being of 800 families and medical care for 450 injured individuals. I have already mentioned that they need mobility devices or assistive devices. We provided 94 assistive devices to the persons with disabilities. 90 persons with disabilities restarted small businesses through our services at that time. Next slide, please. Actually, definitely, everybody need DRR funding, but it is very important and they highly need the DRR funding. I'm talking about the persons with disabilities who are more vulnerable during disaster, after disaster, and before disaster also. And during our work, we have found that though there are some preparedness system, but that is not accessible. That's why funding is needed for inclusive preparedness, and definitely helps maintain assistive devices, healthcare, and economic stability for them. They need financial services, and enables persons with disabilities to be active in disaster planning and disaster decision making. We have found that most of the persons with disabilities out of those empowerment, out of those decision making processes. That's why funding is important for them, to empower them, to ensure the accessibility for them, definitely. And during our work with the children with disabilities and adult with disabilities, we have found that uh, because of continued negligence from the childhood, they have very weak resilience on everything, including the DRR. That's why they need resilience building on DRR. That's why funding is very much important for them, for the civil society who are working for them. Next slide, please. And definitely there are some advocacy recommendation and good practices we need to concern. Disability inclusive disaster risk reduction need definitely for them, and accessible flood shelters and evacuation system is very important if we think about the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Disability awareness for community volunteers who are working into the community. They have limited awareness on disability services. That's why they need awareness, and proper implementation is very important. Country like Bangladesh, where there are so many policies, but most of the policies is not inclusive for persons with disabilities. And we always think about that every people have the same rights. That's why right-based approach is important for ensuring health, ensuring education for all, including children and adults with disabilities. And definitely inclusive early warning system is important for all types of children and adults with disabilities. And targeted social protection for families with children with disabilities is very important. We need to concern about the protection issue of children with disabilities. We are implementing a project of UNICEF Bangladesh, where we have found that during the disaster, so many children with disabilities are at risk. That's why we need to advocate on these issues also. And I have already mentioned that resilience building and DRR training for children and adults with disabilities is important. And definitely community awareness and training, because disability is a different issue. That's why volunteer and community people, each of them need at least basic training on the issue. And definitely collaborative work between government, NGOs, and communities is very much important if we think about to include, or if we think about to ensure the rights of children and adults with disabilities. Next slide, please. Now, there is a case story. This is the live case story. Lipi was 17 years old and lived in Barisal, southern part of Bangladesh. And during the Sida, all her family members went to a nearby shelter home. But as she was a wheelchair user, she could not go to the shelter home. That's why the building collapsed on her body, and she was critically injured at that time. Next slide, please. This is my last one, as I know my time is very short. Actually, sustainable development talked about that nothing about us without us. We should think all people. We should not exclude the children or persons with disabilities in every spheres of life. Their active participation ensured that disaster risk reduction funding is used effectively for accessible shelters, our nearing system, and preparedness program, reducing their vulnerability, enhancing their resilience, and promoting equality in line with the Sustainable Development Goals 13 that talk about climate action, Sustainable Development Goal 10 that talk about reduced inequality, and definitely United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities. So if we talk about the Sendai framework, if we talk about the Sustainable Development Goal or UNCRPD, we always should concern that funding is very important if we think about to include children or persons with disabilities into the services, like before the disaster, during the disaster, and after the disaster also. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iftekhar. Really sincere thanks for sharing the work that you do and really setting the scene of the importance of leaving no one behind and the reality behind the real impact that financing resilience can have on those most at risk. So a huge thanks for sharing that. We've got a few questions coming in, but we're going to hear from everyone and then we're going to take some questions towards the end. So I'm now delighted to hand over to Monica. And Monica, please feel free to speak in either English or Spanish, whatever your preferred language is. And a reminder to everyone that there is a button at the bottom of the screen where you can press more and then pick your language to be interpreted. But yes, over to you, Monica.
Buenos días y buenas tardes para todas las personas que están en la reunión el día de hoy y que estamos interesados en conversar acerca de la importancia de invertir en resiliencia antes que en los desastres, ¿no? No olviden, por favor, seguir esta conversación en inglés para quienes todavía no lo están haciendo. Como Practical Action, hoy queremos compartir con ustedes nuestra experiencia basada en articulación y gobernanza para el financiamiento para la resiliencia climática en comunidades indígenas de la Amazonía boliviana. No me deja presentar de la otra forma, por favor, voy a seguir de esta. Gracias. Bueno, es importante comenzar dando un poco de contexto y en este sentido quiero hablar brevemente sobre el trabajo que está haciendo Practical Action como parte de la Alianza Zurich para la resiliencia climática. Es centrada en mejorar la resiliencia de los riesgos climáticos tanto en comunidades rurales como urbanas y que hoy en día alcanza más de 250 comunidades en diferentes países, en 15 más o menos. Actualmente estamos durante la tercera fase de este programa. Nosotros como Oficina Bolivia de Practical Action nos unimos a la alianza en un trabajo en 13 comunidades el 2021 en 3 municipios de Bolivia. Iniciamos con lo que era entonces conocida como la herramienta de medición para la resiliencia comunitaria ante inundaciones, que actualmente ha evolucionado a ser una herramienta para la medición de la resiliencia climática y no solamente de inundaciones, sino también acerca de olas de calor, incendios forestales. Esta herramienta consta de 2 partes, un marco casi metodológico del trabajo de la Alianza para medir la resiliencia y una herramienta asociada para implementar nuestro trabajo. ¿No? En la pantalla ustedes pueden ver que consta del recojo minucioso de la información en cada comunidad y los resultados de esto está, o sea, en este caso en Puerto Yumani pueden observarlos en la parte en azul, donde pueden ver que el resultado financiero resultó ser identificado como uno de los más bajos en esta comunidad, ¿no? Y entonces era necesario, imperante, poder trabajar en posibles soluciones que aporten a elevarlo y así también incrementar el tema de la resiliencia en otros capitales, ¿no? Subir la resiliencia en realidad de la comunidad. Entonces, voy a pasar a la siguiente. Y justamente, bueno, como pueden ver varias fotografías en la zona, no solo involucró el trabajo de construcción de un albergue como tal, sino estuvo obviamente diseñado para proteger vidas y medios de subsistencia como eje fundamental para esta comunidad, sino que ante las recurrentes inundaciones en la zona se había priorizado otras acciones, ¿no? Como las de capacitación, como las de sistemas de alerta temprana, y todo esto estuvo involucrado dentro de un plan de contingencia que estuvo apoyado por un modelo ejemplar de coinversión y articulación también público-privada en el nivel subnacional, que en este caso en Bolivia para nosotros son los municipios y que por cierto toda esta coordinación y coinversión ha demostrado ya resultados e impactos importantes no solo para la comunidad sino para el gobierno municipal durante las inundaciones de este año del 2025, donde la comunidad sí estuvo afectada pero en realidad con mayor capacidad de respuesta que otras comunidades y no solo digamos evacuó a algunas personas ya o más bien no evacuó solamente a personas vulnerables a este albergue que estuvieron ya identificadas y priorizadas previamente según sus protocolos y plan de contingencia, sino que lideró una búsqueda y rescate exitosos cuando el apoyo del gobierno solo podía ser el de un bote por las exigencias que tenía en otras comunidades. Obviamente esto estuvo coordinado informadamente durante todo el proceso para no aumentar los riesgos o algunas pérdidas que hubieran podido de alguna forma ser importantes. Entonces, en esta lámina lo que yo quiero compartir con ustedes es que la iniciativa del gobierno, o sea, la iniciativa conjunta en realidad del albergue demostró que la construcción de la resiliencia con una gestión colaborativa de riesgo es más efectiva cuando está respaldada por el compromiso, no solo por el financiamiento, sino de varios agentes, ¿no? Como por ejemplo el gobierno local, la comunidad y otros actores que tenían presencia en la zona y que poco a poco se fueron ya sumando. Como pueden ver en la figura, no es la única iniciativa priorizada. En otras comunidades, bajo esta propuesta también priorizaron la construcción de algunos albergues y en esos casos, por ser territorios indígenas bajo un consejo indígena, también se priorizaron dentro de los compromisos la participación e inversión de estas estructuras indígenas, ¿no? Pero en el caso de Puerto Yumani, vemos que si bien la inversión mayor todavía puede ser de una ONG, en este caso de nuestro equipo, ya no es una única inversión y esto se hizo posible esta intervención conjunta, ¿no? Como vemos, existe un presupuesto del plan, o sea, del gobierno municipal, que para explicarles un poco viene de un plan operativo anual del municipio, cuya partida de inversión en este caso correspondía a la comunidad, más otros presupuestos, no solamente de la comunidad, sino de otras secretarías, de otras unidades del gobierno municipal y que superó el 29%, ¿no? Entonces aquí suceden dos cosas importantes que hay que mencionar. Uno es el involucramiento del gobierno local per se y la asignación de presupuestos, evidentemente bajo una condición previa de capacidad y conocimiento que tenía ya este gobierno municipal, ¿no? Como para saber la importancia de invertir en este caso en prevención. Y en segundo lugar, la priorización de esta comunidad en la resiliencia, ya no en otros proyectos, porque ellos dijeron, o sea, nosotros necesitamos el albergue, ¿no? Y queremos, y pidieron a su gobierno que el presupuesto que estaba destinado a ellos, que todavía no era suficiente, pero que incrementó también por otras partidas gubernamentales, se destinen no a canchas, no a casas, no a estas cosas, sino al albergue, que era algo que ellos necesitaban más, ¿no? Entonces, y además de esta priorización de la comunidad, ellos aportaron con una contraparte que nuestro equipo en realidad fue monetizando, ¿no? Nosotros, por ejemplo, tomamos las horas de trabajo que ellos tienen en campo y las convertimos en lo que ellos hubieran invertido económicamente, ¿no? Un jornal por tanto dinero, entonces alcanzaron más otros materiales locales y el control social que ellos hacían al desarrollo de la obra o de la implementación del albergue en específico, más del 27%, ¿no? Voy a pasar la siguiente diapositiva. Ok. Entonces ahí tienen algunas de las experiencias de dos personas, ¿no? El primer caso es del gobierno municipal, que es el director de gestión de riesgo, hablando sobre el trabajo colaborativo, ¿no? Este es un modelo que menciona que es un modelo para seguir para otras comunidades, pero también para otros gobiernos municipales y que además ellos han implementado ya no solamente como parte del trabajo conjunto que nosotros realizamos en zona o en otras, sino que lo implementan ya para temas, por ejemplo, de acceso a agua, para otros riesgos como incendios. Entonces ya hay un trabajo coordinado donde saben que el presupuesto se puede incrementar si se hace de forma colaborativa y identificando los actores que tienen participación y por lo tanto dentro del marco de la gobernanza. Y el segundo testimonio es de la responsable de riesgos de la comunidad Puerto Yumani, que es pues quien encabezó esta búsqueda y evacuación durante las inundaciones de este año, ¿no? Un punto que es importante para mí mencionar es justamente que este albergue y plan de contingencia tal como ha sido más bien ha sido un medio de vida, perdón, un medio para que las mujeres de la comunidad alcancen su voz, ¿no? No solamente por el proceso de capacitaciones que era articulado, paralelo con lo que se estaba haciendo, sino porque ellas mismas han tomado decisiones importantes sobre la construcción del albergue, la priorización de grupos vulnerables, y además también han gestionado este albergue con diferentes actores. Inicialmente era un grupo de autoridades mujeres la que dirigía la comunidad y pese a algunas presiones que se tenían por lo mismo, ¿no? Por las brechas de género, los roles y algunos sexismos de alguna forma dentro de la comunidad, ellas lograron llevar adelante todo este proceso, ¿no? Bueno, ahí tienen algunas otras fotografías que queremos compartir con ustedes y comentarles que esta iniciativa se ha vuelto, como les decía antes, un modelo no solo porque impulsa la construcción del albergue, sino que inspira otras formas de trabajo. Se han sumado otras instituciones, no solamente para complementar lo que es la resiliencia o la preparación dentro de esta comunidad, sino también atender otros tipos de necesidades relacionadas con sistemas de alerta temprana, la rehabilitación y acceso de agua en esta comunidad y en otras. Y en las fotos pueden ver a Maglio con un sistema de información y comunicación aislado, de acuerdo a las necesidades de la comunidad, en el mismo municipio, ¿no? Si bien no es esta foto en Puerto Yumani, es dentro del mismo municipio y este sistema funciona además con energía solar, entonces hay un tema de adaptación y hay sistemas autónomos ubicados en puntos estratégicos de la comunidad, identificar a ver en qué puntos ellos necesitan tener las alertas cuando sea el caso, ¿no? Entonces, igual en Puerto Yumani y en otros sectores, y yo, bueno, con eso quería agradecerles y despedirme.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Those really crucial and powerful examples from those 13 communities that you're working in Bolivia. So yeah, sincere thanks for sharing that with us. And again, I can see questions coming in. I would request anyone asking any questions, if you could use the Q&A box, and then after we've heard from all our speakers, we will mine those questions and try and answer as many as possible. But thank you so much, Monica, for your brilliant presentation. We are now going to hand over to Edet from Nigeria to hear from your brilliant work and all the expertise and experience that you bring to the network. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Becky. First, I am impressed with the theme of this year, for resilience, not disasters, because resilience is proactive, cost-effective, and empowering, but funding disasters is reactive, expensive, and short-term. Please, my task here today will be to share key local impacts from our projects. 2, how effective financing a disaster risk reduction is impacting our work and community. And 3, why is it important to fund a disaster risk reduction? And then finally, I'll be sharing my experience on the key actions or key actions to recommend to disaster risk reduction financing. So then we have had several projects, but I will be concentrating on the training and establishment of mangroves and the use of fuel-efficient wood stove. It will interest you to know that mangrove forests can store significant more carbon per hectare than terrestrial forests, often up to 3 to 10 times more, because they store large amounts of carbon in their soil and roots. While they cover tiny fraction of its surface, they are highly effective at sequestering blue carbon from the atmosphere. Mangrove is called the guardian of the sea because it reduces wave energy and buffers storm surges, providing natural protection against erosion and flooding. Mangrove is also called the womb of the sea because mangroves serve as a spawning ground and nursery for a number of marine species migrating to the safety of the dangling root system to lay eggs, larvae, or larvae. Then to the impacts of our project and the benefit of it in the communities we serve. The mangrove we have established have protected the coastline of these communities from erosion, flooding, and storms. It has provided a natural barrier against climate change impacts. It has also occasioned climate change mitigation because it absorbs large amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Then I'll be talking about the fuel efficient wood stove, the problems that it has been able to address and the benefits it has also provided. One, it has been able to address this deforestation because traditional stove and open fire cooking require large amounts of firewood. Fuel efficient stove reduces wood consumption and help to conserve the forests. Environmental degradation and climate change. Cutting trees for firewood accelerates land degradation and reduces carbon sink. But the efficient wood stove has lowered demand and slowing deforestation and carbon emission. It has also been able to reduce the indoor air pollution, because of the less smoke it provides, which can also reduce some of the respiratory problems. Here you can see that, because of the open fire, people take to excessive smoke. At most times you have eye irritation, respiratory problems. So because of the fuel efficient wood stove, this has been able to reduce the respiratory problems. Then the economic burden and on household, which some people have, family, especially rural areas, spend significant time and money gathering and buying firewood. Efficient wood stove has cut these costs and reduced the time spent collecting fuel for cooking. Then I would also be talking on how effective financing of GNDR is improving the work in the communities. It has been able to reduce vulnerability. Communities have reduced their vulnerability to disasters and also minimizing loss and damage. It has enhanced community resilience. This has built the resilience of the community to recover faster. It has also helped communities to plan and act before disaster strikes. These have strengthened community preparedness and livelihood protection. Then why is it necessary or too important to finance disaster risk reduction? This can prevent disasters from causing large-scale loss of lives and damage. It is cost-effective to prepare and reduce risks than rebuild after a disaster. It will protect vulnerable communities and ensure safer homes and sustainable livelihoods. It would also promote resilience, enabling people and communities to better withstand and recover from disasters. And then finally, from my experience, these are the key actions to recommend. Integrate disaster reduction into national and local budgets. Government should make DRR a regular budget line. Establish community resilience and DRR funds, and build local capacity for resource management. Encourage private companies and banks to invest in resilience or resilience building projects. And also encourage risk mapping, vulnerability assessment, and disaster data in the work we do to reduce disasters. It's also very important to establish transparent reporting and accountability mechanisms to ensure DRR funds are used effectively. Then we should give right also to nature by providing these rights, because nature itself has intrinsic value. Please, I must thank you for your time and also expect any question that might arise from here. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Edet, for your sharing your expertise and experience and very clear recommendations from Nigeria, really focusing on the importance of not forgetting the nature-based solutions and that ability for communities to act before a disaster happens, and therefore why it's so crucial to be able to have locally accessible finance for resilience. Really huge thanks to all three of you for sharing your local experience, expertise, case studies, and recommendations. We are capturing notes and obviously saving the slides that were also shared, and are happy to share that with anyone who's interested as well. You will remember that in the lead up to the global platform for DRR back in June, this issue of localizing finance for DRR was one of our key advocacy messages. And some of the questions coming in are asking what GNDR can do in this topic. So one thing that we committed to as a secretariat, but beyond as a network, is to try to increase our understanding and awareness of the different methods of financing disaster risk reduction. So we're about to kick off a piece of research with the Centre for Disaster Protection, specifically looking at how to localize disaster risk finance. So it's really great to hear those three different contexts, three different areas of expertise. And I guess this is a call to keep an eye out on the community platform for that particular project, because we're going to need all of your expertise, experience, and guidance to try and work together to give some real tangible guidance that we can advocate to governments and member states on how to localize this risk finance. So thank you so much for taking us to your communities and sharing with us all of your expertise again. We're now going to shift over to two more speakers before hopefully we then have a little bit of time for a Q&A. But I'm delighted to now shift over to a bit more of a kind of donor, member state, UN perspective to hear some reflections and some key things coming up from the perspective of both Sida and UNDRR. So again, without taking any more time, I'm going to first hand over to our dear GNDR friend, Anna at Sida, to share your reflections and thoughts. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Those who know me know that I can speak a lot, so I'll do my but I want to be brief so we can have possibly a discussion. I'm Anna, and I've been program manager for GNDR at Sida, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, for a couple of years. Thank you very much for inviting us and allowing us to speak a little bit of our impressions. When I got the question, to speak about the importance of financing disaster risk reduction and, of course, importance of financing reaching local level, I go like, what can I say that not everybody, all 123 people already know? It's just going to be a repetition of what is known, but listening also to the three presentations actually tap into a lot of things that I wanted to highlight. Everybody knows financing, less than 20% of climate financing reaches local level, less than 10% of DRR financing reaches local level. Out of international aid, 2% goes to DRR. So we all know the numbers and we know the facts. It's not working. We've been talking about this for a long time. And I can do challenges also, but that's a whole different discussion. We need to really think of what we can do. The why we should fund on local level on DRR is what you've said. The people who are the first affected in a disaster are the local communities, and this is also where you find the first responders, and this was perfectly visualized by Monica in Bolivia and also by Iftekhar in Bangladesh, and I mean that's the key reason. Another thing is the whole of society, and that you can't just go in and do one thing. And this was also already visualized by you. It was actually, I have a problem with a few of the terminologies that we use in international aid. One of them is vulnerable people or vulnerable groups. These are people that are put in a position not by their own choice, but for external reasons, right? And what you've also shown, again, from Bangladesh, if you give the opportunity to people living with disabilities, they themselves will work towards an inclusive response, an inclusive preparedness. They're not vulnerable. They are in a position that excludes them from being fully integrated, and they have certain needs that other people might not have, but we have other needs, the ones that don't have disabilities. Same in Bolivia, where you were showing women who cannot be seen as a vulnerable group, but they are an excluded group. But again, these are the ones that needs to be also there for preparedness, response, and reconstruction. And it's, the inclusion and the local communities being the ones that are the first responders. And then there's another thing. A lot of times in this international dialogue, you go, well, we have to fund, we have to make sure that financing reaches local level. And I think for some people, at least, depending on who you are, people think either local government, or they think, oh, the local community, or they think CSO. And it's all of those three. And it's really important that all of these three function together, because it's the division of different groups that makes it impossible to actually build build up and sustain resilience in a community or with a people or in a national government. And this was also just reflected in the last presenter from Edet from Nigeria, and also from Monica in Bangladesh, how in order to actually create long-term change, you have to work with the local government, because this is the way forward. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be reflecting much more on why financing needs to reach local level, because I think it's evident. It's the only way to go forward. And I think we're always going to be in a world where, speaking as a government official myself, you know, the government, we have our agenda, and we try to, I mean, depending on the country, some areas of a country is further away from the power, and there will always be need for the local community, the local government, to step up and do the bulk of the work. And that's just how it is. And I think in working together, we can streamline it a little bit more and try to work to lessen the distance between national governments, federal governments, regional governments, and local governments, and thus local community. I think that's a very quick wrap up, but I'm very impressed by the presentations. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna. We're going to hand shortly over to Emilia from UNDRR, but Anna, just to give you a short heads up, we might come back to you to ask specifically what challenges persist in localizing disaster risk finance and what opportunities you might foresee. And we've talked a bit about the need to work with local governments, but if there's anything else that you think could spark an opportunity to move this forward practically. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing those reflections with us. Really, really helpful to hear from you. We're now going to hand over to Emilia from UNDRR for more of a bit of a technical perspective. Emilia has been working leading the anticipatory finance work with UNDRR. So over to you, Emilia.
Thanks a lot, Becky, and thanks also to all the colleagues and all the presentations all the presenters for the fantastic presentations. I think it really, you did a good job in showing kind of the breadth of DRR and what DRR looks like in practice in so many different communities and contexts around the world. And I mean, you're doing precisely the right thing, you know. You're involving those at-risk groups. I concur here with Anna that it's not about, you know, marginalized or vulnerable communities per se, but it's people who are at higher risks, and how when we include certain people and elements, maybe a program that we've designed would look very much different, and the finance would go through different ways and have a better result. So you're talking about the things that are very close to UNDR's heart: multi-stakeholder collaboration, action at local level. And I think also the example that we heard from Bolivia clearly shows that, I mean, it's about planning, it's about bringing all of those people together, it's about setting up that joint plan, having the preparedness measures in place, finding, you know, involving both the communities and the government to find the solutions. But then we get to the challenges, of course, and the thing is, like, there will never be, you know, as Anna said, you know, we know the figures, and we have the figures here today on International DRR Day. We're talking a lot about the figures, you know, 1% of public budgets are put towards DRR. All of this pays off, but we don't put the money to it. And we saw it with COVID, right? Like, suddenly when something happens, we put a lot of money on it, and then it goes away, and we move the money to something else because we all have our own kind of political priorities, and there is no chest of gold that we can just like dig into and give everywhere. So I think that's the challenge that communities and local organizations like yours are struggling with at the moment, that there is just not enough money to go around. And part of the work that UNDRR is doing is really to work in partnership with all of the different actors. So working with governments at national and local level, but also private sector, international financing institutions, many more and donors to really see how can we come up with kind of a comprehensive DRR financing strategy at the national level, at local levels. Like how can we all, who does what, who pitches in and supports what, and how can we do it through budgets, through grants, but also through new instruments like insurance. So that's where we've had good experience also working at the local level, at subnational level with agricultural cooperatives, for example, with the insurance sector, to help them like get that data on what is it that is happening, who is most at risk, what are the damages and the losses. And for them, ultimately, I mean, it's about finding a market, right, as well, where they might not have the access to all of that data and information. And that's why, going back to Kamal's message in the beginning, we need you. Like we need the voices from the ground. We need your experience. We need that to tell the story, to understand what's really happening, who's being affected, you know, how much, what's happening, what are the damages. And otherwise there's a risk that with more and more of these disasters happening, you know, it's only the big ones that make the headlines. So it's very important, like community organizations, local organizations play a very critical role in getting that message out there. And of course in the implementation as well, as Anna said, and I think it's very well known, and you know it, you know, more than anyone. I mean, you are the ones who are on the front line, the first ones to respond, the first ones to prepare, the first ones to know what's happened and what you need. So I think maybe just like one message that what we've seen is that there is still kind of an expectation that there is a money chest somewhere. It doesn't exist, but we do see a lot more money in climate change, you know, adaptation, mitigation. Well, the international environment is what it is, but there is funding available, but it doesn't necessarily trickle down, right? So that's the thing, and I think we have to become quite smart at creating the partnerships and working with each other, because like sometimes the needs just don't match. And then we get into very, very many steps. And on the way, like money is lost, you know, so there's very little that trickles down all the way. And I think that's where GNDR is also playing a very important role, is in spreading the message and improving kind of DRR and climate finance literacy among its constituencies, and for all of us to understand like how can we use blended finance, for example, to support our project. So I think we're on the right track. It's just that the challenges are pretty huge, and especially now with also the kind of the gap, the enormous gap, and like in humanitarian financing, you know, people are kind of falling off their feet and having to reorient themselves very, very quickly. So that's, I think, the challenge, you know, are we able to do that? I'm going to put here in the chat, we worked also with some, with the Global Shelter Cluster on kind of a little bit of a tool guideline for mainstreaming for financing. That's focusing specifically on shelter cluster operations, but mainstreaming DRR and environment and the different funding sources for that. So I think I'll stop there, because I'm sure I see there's a lot of good questions in the chat. So happy to take more later. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emilia. Really helpful and really great to hear those messages kind of being reinforced, needing that voice from the ground and that critical role of civil society, and maybe some other resources coming in as well that we can have a look at that you're going to share. So really, really massive thanks for joining us. I'm going to take us back to Anna quickly, and Emilia, I'm then going to come to you to ask these kind of 2 follow-up questions for this segment. One around what you think are those biggest challenges at the moment for DRR financing. We've touched upon them a bit already, but what do you think those key challenges are, and what future opportunities you might foresee to make disaster financing more accessible for local communities? And maybe I'll add in, as a moderator's privilege, one additional question. As GNDR starts looking a little bit more about this topic on localizing disaster risk finance, what advice would you give to us in trying to figure out how to advise on making it more practical? So, Anna, back to you first.
Thank you. How much time do I have for that? Thank you very much. All right, I'll be very brief. My points on the challenges, and I'm sorry if it's gonna sound a bit harsh, but we have to face reality. As Emilia was saying, you know, this golden chest of money. I mean, there is funding in the world, but there's a lot of things that it prioritized to. I think the challenge is first of all, development aid funding is decreasing globally. Even Sweden, who has been a proud 1% of GDP, is now reduced. There's new priorities for some of the development aid, and now I'm speaking as a European Union member, which is Russia's invasion in Ukraine. That is a big focus, and a lot of funding is going into there. So it's still development aid, but it's also humanitarian aid, and it's to defend Europe. And that's just a fact. And I would also say that even development aid shouldn't be political, but it's used a lot in political dialogue, which has different consequences. One of the consequences is that we have to be more rigid in following each and every krona or dollar or pound or euro. And I think this is just the harsh reality. There's less funding. The funding is prioritized, redirected to other places. And we have a strict control of our funding, which I think is good, because it's about being able to tell our taxpayers where their money goes to. But it also means that a small NGO in, I don't know, Bolivia, with 30 employees maybe, they won't have the necessary capacity or manpower just to do the reporting, and that's a simple fact, and we are aware of this. I will say that a challenge for us is also that Swedish aid is being reformed right now, and we're in the middle of a reorganization and reform and new strategies. And one of the things there are a couple of things that we want to that we prioritize now. One of them is to look more at how can we reach local level. I think the challenge is we all get stuck on how. We think it's important. We want to implement. We've been doing a lot of policy support and very high level support for a long time. And now even from global level, from our headquarter level, we have to prioritize on actually changing things on the ground. And we get stuck in the how. And I don't have an answer to it, but I think we have to have a lot of dialogues to find the way that we can reach the local level. And I will say one thing that hasn't been mentioned today, and I will just say it because I think it's one of the major challenges for a lot of organizations, is the shrinking democratic space. I haven't got a solution to it, but I think it has to be in everybody's head when we talk about localization. So I think those are the main challenges. But I think if I should sum it down to one, it's the how. We all know why it's important, but we just haven't found the way to do it. Future opportunities. Well, again, we're in the middle of a reform, so I'm not sure. But another one of our priorities as Sweden and in our reform is increased focus on the private sector. The fact is that reality today is development aid is not going to solve the problems in the world, unfortunately. Bilateral donors such as Sida or countries, we cannot reach the local level in the most effective way. We can reach a lot, but considering that GNDR has almost close to 2,000 members, right? Impossible for a bilateral donors to provide support to all of them. And I would say opportunities on how to address the issue of financing on local level is a number of things. I think don't look too high. Try, if you can get a global donor, sure, really good. But I think it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. So I would say look more in the regional level or local level. Look at what other funding opportunities are there. There are private companies that either can fund it directly, just give funding for an organization to use, or a private company that can work together with you. You can be a vital part for a private company to get access to an area, but at the same time, you can make sure that private companies that operate in your region, your country, your area, does not go against, human rights or implement something that is going against disaster, that is, increasing the disaster risk. So you have to work together. I would say another thing that I know as a donor, it's a program manager, it's hard to do. But I think going together and seeking support from other organizations that is within your field, either within the country or in the region, going into consortium, that could be a way forward. I'm just throwing out a lot of examples that's been going through my head here. We have a saying in Swedish also that, I don't know if, well, it probably translates to English, but it is that need is the mother of innovation. So basically, when there is a need, when there's nothing else to do, this is when the best innovations come forward. So I want to say, I get frustrated that financing is not available for local actors. I imagine being a local organization, local community is even more frustrating. You have to, reality is that we have to think outside the box and find other ways. And it's hard to do so by yourself. So I would go, join forces and keep pushing, because we need the local perspective, and we need the local community to keep pushing higher up to make sure that changes are made. And I have to highlight, I'm very happy that UNDRR is here, because for me, it's one of the key things that I do. I talk to UNDRR about the importance of working with GNDR, and you at GNDR, that I ask you how, push you to work with UNDRR. And this is the thing, it's not just coordination, but it's about working together for a common goal. Thank you. That was a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. No, been noting down all of your key reflections, and yeah, absolutely very, very, very helpful. Before I hand over back to Emilia for a few minutes of reflections on those challenges, opportunities, or any guidance as we start to look a bit more at practically trying to figure out how to do this in practice at the local level. Lots of the questions have been the same that are coming through, asking if people can have the recording and the presentations. Absolutely, this is being recorded, and we'll share afterwards on the community platform So yes, absolutely. And if you're not a member of GNDR, please feel free to get in touch with us for the recording if you would like it. I'll put my email in the chat box shortly. But keeping an eye on time, back to you, Emilia, for a few minutes of your reflections on those challenges and opportunities.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, and sometimes I prefer not to talk about them because I think we all know them very well, and we've been going over them, and I'm not sure some of them, you know, it's not going to change anytime soon. So maybe just to turn them into opportunities, I think definitely the partnership element is key, and I think that I mean, of course, it depends on where you work and who you can work with and what your situation is. But I think there's always partners available. There's always someone who is doing something slightly similar or working where you have a bit of expertise that they don't have. And I think that's a really great way of building kind of proof of concept of different things and getting the message out and maybe then replicating it in other regions or communities. I think that's key, and that's also a way whereby we can get, just the proof of concept and to be able to show that this works and we can work. So I think that is really one of the key things that we have to go with. And the other thing is mainstreaming. Because DRR is very broad, and I think a fair few of you were mentioning kind of the classic things, the early warning, you know, where we also have a lot of projects and money going now, right? So early warning, preparedness, you know, readiness for response and recovery and so on. But DRR is also about mainstreaming within all the sectors, in the agriculture sector, health sector, you know, water, environment and DRR are linked, you know, so I think also that could be an interesting angle to approach it from. But again, it goes back to like, what is the core mandate of your organization and what is it that you do? I think someone was mentioning here in the chat as well, kind of the policies and programs that exist in country, and that's good. They do exist, and there's a lot of strategies, but what's the level of implementation? So maybe also look at, I mean, even where I live, like in a local community, right? There's part of the governments and sectors, some work because there's like a person who just makes it work, and the other ones are like, you know, hobbling along, maybe not so active. So find the movers and shakers, you know, and join them and become the movers and shakers, right? And take it to other places. So I think there's opportunities, but you have to be very smart and you have to be ready to network and spread out kind of slowly, right? And that's the idea of GNDR as well, right? Is to create that, you know, global momentum and to connect it and create a movement and then make change. Stop at that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Emilia. Yeah, a bit of motivation there. And I'm sure we'll be coming back to you, Emilia and Anna, for any guidance as we move forward and try to deep dive into this particular topic a bit more in the coming months. We've got about 10 minutes left of our webinar, and Marcus is going to do some closing remarks for us. But before we do that, I wanted to give an opportunity to our three members to answer some questions that have been coming in the Q&A box. I can see some of our speakers have been super proactive and already answered in the chat box. So thank you for that. I can see Emilia and Iftekhar, you've already answered a couple of questions. But I'm going to go in and just pull out a couple of questions for our speakers from the member side. There was a particular one to Edet. So from Jonas, first, a very good presentation, and thanking you. There's a specific question asking you if DRR was the focus for the conservation of mangroves or an add-on benefit. So that's one question for you. And secondly, was your project able to quantify the multiple benefit from this mangrove conservation? And is there any data available? So hopefully we still have Edet connected. Fingers crossed. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. The first question is how disaster reduction relates to nature. I think, was that the question, please?
Not quite. It was DRR the focus of that particular project, or was it kind of an added benefit?
Okay. DRR is actually a focus on the project. Why I had to bring the environment into it? We find out that it's the environmental degradation, deforestation, that is, actually causing disasters. So it would be better to tackle it from the root. I think maybe from the environmental angle, and automatically disasters will be reduced. Then talking about data in terms of mangrove, for mangrove, there has been series of research, or the research is being done around. Before now, we have known that mangrove can sequester carbon maybe 3 or 4 times compared to the terrestrial forests. But recent research has shown that it's up to 8 to 10 times, the mangrove can absorb carbon, as I already mentioned. Why it is really so? Because of the help of the roots, and it stores some carbon in the soil. So that is why mangrove, to an extent, can absorb more carbon than the terrestrial forest we have. Even if it's in a small space, it still has power to store this. Please, I don't know, was there any other question?
That was very helpful.
Is there any other?
No, that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think we're getting a little bit of echo on the last bit of our webinar, but hopefully our tech team are working in the background to fix it. So hopefully you can still understand me. But thank you so much, Edet, for that, to answering those questions. Really helpful. We have a few questions coming in specifically on flood risk and how to prepare communities. And similar to you, Edet, you said that there are quite a few resources that you had around mangroves. What I would ask, if possible, if you could either email them to me or directly upload them onto our community platform. It's a really great space to share resources and information, and the same with any of our members working on flood-prone disaster risk reduction. That would be super helpful as well. We only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to hand over to Marcus, our Executive Director, to just share a few closing words to end our webinar. From me, a huge thanks to all of our speakers for being here with us today. Really, really helpful, really, really interesting, and a really wonderful chance to mark the work that we're all doing, but particularly members working with communities. And a massive thanks also to all those working in the background, the team supporting the event management of this, and of course our brilliant interpreters. But Marcus, over to you for a few closing remarks. Thank you.
I think, well, very little to say. I mean, it was a great webinar. Thank you, everybody. I mean, from what I heard, we really, at some point, Emilia tried to respond to what you were somehow asking, to show, to mainstream and to show what is possible. And I think the stories and honestly, the good work that we heard from our members somehow responded to what Mr. Kamal Kishore was also saying at the beginning in his message about making sure that we civil society organizations can advocate for localization and we can advocate at national and a local level, showing how powerful that action can be for a good and effective and cost-effective DRR financing. I wanted to thank very much Iftekhar from Bangladesh, also Monica from Bolivia, and of course Edet from Nigeria, because those you know, your work, your knowledge, and the cases, stories that you brought were really interesting in understanding how we can be more inclusive and how we can be even more ambitious in implementing DRR strategies. First, Iftekhar bringing the good example from the Center for Services and Information on Disability, brought that specific case of not just LIPI, that it was mentioned, trying to reflect about nothing about us without us, how we can promote active participation, but also bring into the conversation the need of not just medical support, but also psychosocial support, how important that is to be prepared, but also to provide that kind of support after disaster, the disasters hit. Definitely, and this is something that GNDR has been advocating for many years, DRR funding need to reach those more vulnerable, including, of course, people with disability. And I found your recommendations, Iftekhar, quite relevant for not just disability inclusive DRR, but also when you mentioned early warning systems, that sometimes it is something that is separated from DRR, unfortunately. And when speaking about vulnerable communities, Monica brought also to the table indigenous communities, who, you know, not just in Puerto Yumani, but also in many of the communities our members work on, are really relevant, but highlighting how we can promote as civil society organizations climate resilience through collaborative models. And it was really interesting to see how local communities and local authorities made it to work together, even involving some other local groups, and again working on early warning systems as well, and through renewable energy. So really comprehensive example from Bolivia that was probably complete through also the example from Nigeria, from Edet, speaking about nature-based solutions, working with mangrove, and again how we can increase resilience and reduce vulnerabilities to disasters. And again, he was very accurate in his recommendations. Thanks again, Edet, when you spoke about how to make sure that we integrate, or we promote integration of DRR on budget lines at the local level as well, not just national strategies, but at the local level, and how those are accessible to the communities, encouraging as well the private-public partnerships and co-financing, and of course, improving the accountability mechanisms, because there's no financing if we forget about, or fair financing if we forget about accountability. And then that kind of dialogue illustrated and promoted by those three beautiful examples, I think it was very, very extended by the great insights from Anna from Sida and Emilia from UNDRR. And again, the thing is how, and I think that Anna was very right in making sure that, in pointing out what are the key challenges. And I think it's about the how to reach and how to make localization more effective. I think that the somehow call to action from Emilia about becoming the movers and the shakers, to create a movement in that sense, can summarize what we've been talking about. Of course, as Anna said, understanding what is reality, or what is the reality that we are facing. It is not easy. There's less money available, unfortunately, and there is a lot of influence of other politically driven initiatives, but we know that this is important. I mean, important. This is more than important, and it has to be localized to be effective. I think that in that promotion of DRR movement, as Kamal Kishore was requesting, and Emilia remembered us, I think I wanted to finalize with a beautiful sentence from this Welsh writer, Raymond Williams, which I think is about this. It says something like this: to be truly radical is to make hope possible. I think that we saw through all the examples that our members showed, how radical we can be in changing reality at local level. That's about localization, and that's about effectiveness. More or less, that's what I got from this beautiful webinar. I just wanted to thank very much again, to finalize, of course, to Anna from Sida, to Emilia from UNDRR, Monica, Iftekhar, and Edet for bringing your voices and your experience to the conversation, and of course everybody for joining us and for celebrating with us this beautiful International Day for Disaster-Based Reduction. Thank you very much.